Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Today, we're having a quick look at GPU performance in the PC version of Red Dead Redemption 2. But before we get too far into it, today's video is sponsored by PC Case Gear, Australia's premier online PC store. Whenever I'm in the need for a product, they're the first place I turn to, and I've been a customer of theirs for years now, so I really can attest to the quality of their service. I value their broad product range, competitive pricing, customer support, and easy to navigate website. With 2 decades of experience, I know I can trust PC Case Gear to look after you guys as well as they look after me. So for more information, please check the link in the video description. Okay, so the plan was to provide a super detailed benchmark analysis, much like what we often try to do with these major releases. One example would be what we recently did with Borderlands 3. I think there I tested something like 60 GPUs. Actually, I think it was just over 60 GPUs. Anyway, point was, it was a lot of GPUs. The plans to do exactly that with Red Dead Redemption 2, they quickly went out the window when I discovered just how hard benchmarking this game is. The game appears to have a number of quick presets, which allow you to quickly and easily configure your system using a nice little slider. The quality preset level slider offers a number of settings. There's half a dozen performance modes, there's 7 balanced profiles, and then an additional 7 quality presets. And that all sounds great, but the problem is the settings aren't static. They're not applied in sort of a static fashion. So if you hit Ultra, everything may not necessarily be Ultra as you'd expect. And this meant that I had to manually configure each and every graphical setting. And as I said, there were over 30 of them, so a very painful process. But even worse was the fact that every single time I changed a graphics card, which obviously I did a lot of to try and make this video, or I updated a display driver or, did a fresh display driver install, those graphical settings all reverted back to their default state, meaning each and every time without fail, I had to reconfigure all the graphical settings for every single graphics card. This was an extremely time-consuming and very tedious process, and sadly that meant it has severely limited the number of GPUs that I could test. The game does feature a pretty good-looking built-in benchmark, but I had 2 issues which stopped me from using it. Firstly, it runs far longer than necessary. A thorough benchmark is nice and all that, but a 5-minute test I feel is a bit overkill, and I just don't have time to run it 3 times per GPU and then per resolution. The other reason I didn't use it is what I think is a bug. Basically, it would fail to load back to the menu every 2nd or 3rd run, particularly after a resolution change, so that had forced me to close the game down and then start all over again. So that just added to what was already a very tedious process. Therefore, I'm testing in-game performance, and the benchmark takes place in the settlement of Coulter. Performance here does seem to mimic that of the benchmark, so the numbers should be very much the same. As for the quality settings, I've manually set every option to high, and I'm using the DirectX 12 API as it runs considerably smoother than Vulkan right now, and this was the case with both the Radeon and GeForce GPUs. So if you're experiencing frame drops or any kind of stuttering using Vulkan, then I suggest switching over to DirectX 12. That should solve your problem, at least it did for me. Then, as usual, I'm using our Intel Core i9 1900K GPU test rig, which has been overclocked to 5GHz and packs 16GB of DDR4 3400 memory. The latest AMD and NVIDIA drivers have been used, and all testing takes place at 1080p, 1440p, and 4K. So let's get into it. Starting with the 1080p results, we see the GeForce RTX 2080 Ti is good for over 100 FPS at all times in our test, using the high quality settings. Not amazing performance at 1080p, especially given how powerful the 2080 Ti is. And we get a real sense of just how demanding this game is when looking at the GTX 1080 and 1660 Ti, as both struggled to push over 60 FPS. 60 FPS at 1080p. That's crazy for GPUs of this caliber. Not only that, but using these dialed down quality settings, the GTX 1060 6GB was very laggy and the RX 570 was borderline playable. Ideally, you'll want an RTX 2060 or Vega 56, and that's a pretty big ask for 1080p gaming. When looking over the results, something you might have noticed is how well the Radeon GPUs perform, at least relative to the GeForce parts. The RX 580 destroyed the GTX 1060 and basically matched the 1070. That's not something you often see. Vega 56 easily beat the GTX 1080, while the RX 5700 matched the RTX 2070 Super. Then we have the 5700 XT on par with the RTX 2080, so a super result here for AMD. Nvidia's made it pretty clear that Red Dead Redemption 2 doesn't support ray tracing, and they did this after they obviously misled people with their Nvidia GeForce Twitter account, which featured an RTX on logo. But I bring this up because looking at the 1440p results, you'd be forgiven for thinking DXR was enabled. And this is because for an average of just 60 FPS, you'll require something like Vega 64, an RTX 2060 Super, or an RTX 2070. Again, those are some brutal GPU requirements for 1440p gaming using dialed down quality settings. Finally, we have the 4K results, and yeah, you guys probably saw where this was going. Good luck playing this game at the 4K resolution without something like an RTX 2080 Ti. In fact, that couldn't even average 60 FPS. But for this style of game, that probably isn't really a big issue. It's still very playable, and most would probably be happy with around 40 FPS. That said, I personally would like around 60 FPS to enjoy this one, so I'd be dropping down to 1440p with a high-end GPU. Okay, so that's the testing I've been able to do so far. Admittedly, it's not really a whole lot, and I would have liked to do a lot more, but for now, that's what we have. And it is a hell of a lot better than nothing, which is what I thought we might end up doing given how difficult the game was to accurately benchmark with a large volume of graphics cards. For now, AMD seems to be doing very well relative to the Nvidia competition, and while it is possible we will see a performance uplift for the GeForce GPUs through a new driver, we'll just have to wait and see on that one. Nothing's guaranteed at this point. But for now, the Navi-based GPUs in particular, they do look very handy in this title. And I should just note that the results may vary a bit depending on the quality settings and the section of the game used for testing, but overall I found the margins to be fairly consistent in the first hour or so of gameplay. There's no doubt going to be a few settings that will favour the Radeon or GeForce GPUs a bit more so than the other, but right now I don't have time to explore all the quality settings and see. Basically do what I often include as like a GPU quality scaling type benchmark, but yeah, haven't got time for that, so sorry about that. That said, I do suggest using DirectX 12 as Vulkan appears to have some real performance issues right now. Also, as noted earlier, you can't use the preset slider to compare certain quality levels on your system with a different system, as it's very possible you won't be running the same quality settings despite using the same notch on the slider. As for how demanding Red Dead Redemption 2 is, and if those demands can be justified, well, that's a bit of a hard one to gauge. I expect we will see some performance improvements, but overall the game does look very amazing. It's extremely detailed and there's an incredible amount of stuff being rendered in, so without a detailed graphical analysis, it's really hard to say. On that note, depending how popular this video is, Tim might spend a few days putting together an optimization guide next week when he returns from his holiday, and I for one really hope that is possible because that's something I'd like to see. And the game might also receive an update or two before then, so yeah, fingers crossed that that happens. Anyway, that is going to do it for this one. Again, sorry for the limited testing, but I think I've explained that one enough at this point. And yeah, if you do appreciate the testing that we did manage to do, and we didn't end up canning the video like I thought I might, because I was basically getting driven crazy by the tedious process of setting up every single graphics card. But if you appreciate that, then one of these would be appreciated from us. If you want to join us, become more involved with the channel, you can jump over to our Patreon page. You'll get access to our Discord server, our monthly live streams, and a few other cool things that Tim and myself do. You can also support us by grabbing some of our merch if you like the channel that much. We have the hoodie that I'm wearing, a mug, and a few other cool things. You can see them. Again, link is in the video description. But apart from that, I'm going to have to wrap this one up because I have to pack and then grab a flight to New Zealand because I will be attending Kev's funeral, which will be live streamed on his channel. So it's something a bit different, but definitely something I think Kev would have wanted. So yeah, a pretty bold but good choice there from the family. But that's all I have to say on this one. So yeah, thank you for watching. I'm your host, Steve. See you again next time.